Battlefield 5, the first time that the world saw the game was its infamous reveal trailer, and it certainly didn't hit all the right thematic notes in respect of what most fans wanted from a new Battlefield game based on World War II. Of course, there have been a lot of World War II games throughout the years and in popular culture. That war is very well documented. Most of us have probably studied it in history class, have seen Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan, and we will know the major theatres of war, whether that's the beaches of Normandy or the Battle of Stalingrad. But when it was announced that BF5 was going to focus on untold and unknown war stories and locations, it didn't go down all that well. But I do think that Battlefield 5 had some excellent features packed away in there. And first of all, we're going to turn to what I believe was the best content released for BF5, the Pacific. Now, looping back, when it comes to a trailer that met fans' expectations, I think the Pacific trailer was perfect. But it wasn't just the trailer, it was the content too. The Pacific DLC brought some iconic locations to the game, some of which fans had wanted since day one. We got 3 new maps, one being Pacific Storm, which was quite similar to Parasol Storm, in the sense that it is massively affected by a storm that changes the gameplay. And then a big fan favourite, of course, was the remastered Wake Island. It's probably right up there as one of the most iconic Battlefield maps ever. The BF5 version was brilliant though, and brought back loads of great memories from BF 1942, as well as a fantastic Crab Rave Easter egg. And then lastly, we were treated to Iwo Jima, arguably the best map in the game for me. Storming the beach and pushing onto land was just so good, and it looked great too. And then you had to fight into the caves, take control. If you were lucky, you might find the new katana pickup. You could find yourself slicing up enemies as you went. Flamethrower Shermans driving through caves, artillery cannons, squads going around in jeeps, planes dogfighting above, and it all came to a head at the top of a mountain. It felt like a great sandbox Battlefield map. And on top of those 3 maps, the game finally got some iconic weapons that players had been crying for, most notably the M1 Garand. That iconic ping never gets old. What about the gunplay though? This is a bit of a tough one because there was a point in the game where this changed quite dramatically and it really segregated the player base. I think the general result though was that players preferred how the gunplay and damage was originally when the game first released. The gunplay was fun, it felt like there was some real power to the guns, but they had recoil too. Not a whole lot, but enough that you definitely noticed it, and they felt really fun to use. I personally was and still am a big fan of the gunplay in BF5, but some people will definitely prefer the models from previous games, and that's fine. Of course, sniping here was also fantastic. It wasn't as easy as it was in BF1, and there was no sweet spot mechanic this time around, but even still, it's so incredibly satisfying to get multiple sniper kills in a row. It's one of my favourite things to do in this game, but beware of the sniper glint though, you will be a bit of a sitting target. There were loads of little gameplay improvements in Battlefield 5 too. For example, the ability to throw grenades back was a welcome addition to the game, and shooting grenades mid-air or while they were on the floor to explode them was epic and introduced some new tactics. Generally speaking, BF5 did keep a lot of the same movement mechanics from BF1, so you still had sliding, vaulting, hoisting yourself up, but this time you could also dive onto your back, left, right, forward, and mantle onto more things than ever before. Fortifications too, how could we forget that? Massive addition to the game, and while it may not be as useful as it could be, I still think that it is a good addition to the franchise. The ability to add certain cover elements, weapons, or even rebuild houses that were destroyed and fortify them was something really different, and while some may say it's a gimmick and you don't really get much choice because it's all limited to wherever the map designer thinks you should be able to build something, I do think that when used correctly, it adds to the gameplay in a positive way. There was also the squad revive, and I think that's an absolutely brilliant idea. Even when you're not a medic, being able to revive one of your squad mates with a much longer animation just added to the team play made the game a bit less frustrating, and working as a squad a little less reliant on having a medic in it. BF5 is a treat for your ears as well. The sound design in this game, fantastic, and the soundtrack too. There are some absolutely stirring and emotional pieces in here that were recorded by a live orchestra. I've got it on a Spotify playlist, and I'm sure that we can all agree DICE absolutely knocked this section of the game out of the park. Next, let's talk customization. It's a bit of a contentious point when it comes to BF5, I think. We all know the storm that kicked up from the initial trailer, It kind of looked a bit more like BF Heroes than a realistic World War II game, but let's not focus on the certain customization elements that people didn't like. Let's simply focus on the fact that it existed. Really, for the first time in a Battlefield game, you could truly customize your soldiers. In previous games, yeah, you could put a certain skin or outfit on, or at least tweak it a bit, but this time around, you had a load of customization. You could change almost anything. You could change their faces, face paint. You could customize each part of their outfit independently. You could even have a certain pair of trousers, a different jacket, a crazy helmet. It made for a lot of individuality in the game. Again, something that's been loved and criticized by others. But I do think that the core idea of having that deep level of customization in the game is still a good thing. It's just the things that were there that were perhaps a bit hit and miss. And then we've got the elite characters, taking this a step further. These characters were set soldiers that couldn't be customized further, but they offered up distinct personality, with custom voice lines, melee weapons and visual styles. These weren't free though, you had to pay up if you wanted access to them, and quite a lot were released over the course of Tides of War. Also, no premium this time around. All of the additional real gameplay content like maps, game modes, guns, completely free for anyone that owned the game. I think BF5 would have gone this way anyway, based on how the industry is right now, but no more premium here to separate the player base. Moving on, I think it would be hard to talk about Battlefield 5 and not mention Firestorm, because I think that it offered a lot of promise. Sadly, Firestorm wasn't released at the same time as the game launched, instead coming out some months after, which was the first major issue. The second, of course, was the fact that this Battle Royale mode was stuck behind the paywall of needing the base game. It wasn't free to play in a free to play environment. Firestorm never had a chance. It's something that Warzone since ensured wasn't a problem. Firestorm didn't really get any support after it launched either, which was a shame. There was one small map update, but apart from that, it was done. But I think if Firestorm had been something similar to Warzone and had regular updates and instead been a Frostbite Battle Royale, it could have been a really popular game and still would be if it continued to update. I love the gunplay in it, I love the destruction in a BR game, and I do think that it offered up something a bit different with the vehicle gameplay. Of course, COD Warzone is doing that now too. I enjoyed playing it. It's just a shame that it never truly lived up to its potentials. Of course, it wasn't perfect. Some people didn't think it was interesting enough, and that's okay. But let's not talk about the looting system. That was awful. But I think with a bit more love, it could have been improved significantly. And like I mentioned, the destruction. No building was safe in Firestorm because of any number of explosives that you could use to bring them down. And that brought with it a whole new challenge in BR games that was definitely unique to Firestorm. And I'd say the destruction model in Battlefield 5, in general, it was a lot more like Bad Company 2 for the most part. Yeah, you couldn't see entire levels completely decimated, but the dynamic destruction of houses was still really impressive. They wouldn't completely crumble, mind you, but when you fired off a few explosives into a building and saw half of it simply disappear, you could see how far that we've come in recent years. And the choice not to have everything be completely leveled isn't a restriction of the game either, at least I don't think so. I do believe it's a design choice to ensure that players always have at least a little bit of cover, a middle ground between complete and utter destruction and an enjoyable gameplay loop. I have to say that I do love the V1 as well. Just made for some awesome epic moments, especially when the game launched. The multi-kills that you could get with this thing, incredible. Now by the end of 2018, BF5 had sold 7.3 million copies. That's not a small amount of sales by any standards, and since then, especially with the addition of EA and Origin Access, now called EA Play, I'm sure that the overall player numbers are a lot better than people think. That being said, BF5 was not as popular as BF1, and we know that simply from the earnings reports that were made public by EA. They admitted that the initial sales were lower than they had anticipated, but that doesn't mean that the game was a failure. I think BF5 had a load of potential, and there are positives that we can take from it, and hopefully the next game builds on that, learns from the mistakes, and improves on them. And that's all, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Do let me know your thoughts on BF5 down in the comments below. I know a lot of you guys still play this game, so what are your favorite things about it? Let's hear it. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.